Hey, welcome to David's Den. I'm David. This is the book club in my den, and today we're going to get a little serious. I didn't script anything like I normally do, especially after I got a little too over ambitious in my Salem's Lot adaptation correlation. Not doing that again for a while. But today I want to talk about Rage. Stephen King's third published book, the first under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. And I have an electronic copy. Oh, there's my nephew and me from a number of years ago. You can't find this anywhere. It's available on Amazon for like $1,500 for a paperback, and with good reason. Let me just get this pulled up here. So what I want to do today, I've highlighted certain passages, probably more than I needed to, honestly, because I go a little crazy. And then normally my process is to whittle everything down and write a script that is too long. So believe me, you should see the stuff that I cut from most of my scripts. But the point that I'm trying to make, Rage fell out of publication in 1998. I think officially 97 was the last printing or when they made the decision. I didn't pull up a lot of my notes. I did a lot of research. I read all this through, but this topic I think is so important and it hit me in such a personal way that I didn't want to script this. I wanted to just talk to you. I got rid of the Book Nook jacket. I'm only still in this virtual backdrop because my apartment is small and a wreck in New York City and I don't want you to see it. And I'm going to try to piece together my ramblings in the editing process and make something coherent out of this. So yeah, let's talk. Stephen King kind of hit the market hard. Carrie was his first book to be published. Salem's Lot was written before Carrie, actually, but it was his second published book. And they came out, 74 in 1975. And his publishers, I think it was Doubleday at the time, said, we don't want to oversaturate the market, especially in a genre like horror. And Stephen King has always said he's not a horror writer, he's a suspense or a thriller writer. He's just a writer. And he kind of got pigeonholed into the category of horror after Carrie and then the decision to publish Salem's Lot. Rather than Roadwork, which was the options that he gave to his publisher for his next book. That's all in the Salem's Lot Illustrated Edition forward, I think. Afterward? No, it's in the forward. The history of that. In 1985, the Bachman books were published, which is an anthology of the 4 books that he had written under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. And in that introduction, just to paraphrase, King explains that they didn't want to oversaturate the market. And he had all these ideas. He had some manuscripts that were already in his back pocket, obviously, if Carrie came out before Salem's Lot. And he was showing him Roadwork, which I think is the 3rd Richard Bachman book published. And we still have to get through The Shining and The Dead Zone and Firestarter before we even get to that. And so they decided to publish under a pseudonym Richard Bachman, which would also let Stephen King explore avenues that were not just horror. Although Rage is fairly horrific. For it's human horror. I think I talk about this in Salem's Lot adaptation correlation about how Cully, what he can do to Bonnie and Larry is so much more horrific than the vampires, right? Out of jealousy and a sense of entitlement and ownership. But that's for another video, or it was for another video. Rage had a lot of very strong responses in a lot of its readers, me included. It was published in 1977. Over the next 2 decades, there were a number of school shootings where Rage featured prominently. It was found in the locker of one child. It was found in the room of another, whether it was a solo published book or in the Bachman book anthology, the collection, Omnibus. There was one shooting where the shooter is attributed as quoting from the book when it was actually a misquote. There was another shooting, the final shooting, where 8 students were shot, 3 of them killed by one of their classmates after reading this book. And King said, "That's enough. I'm done." He voluntarily took the book out of publication. Obviously, the publishers agreed with him. He commented in a keynote address, I think it was to the Vermont Library Association. I'm getting that name wrong. VEMA, I think was the acronym. He said it was rightfully discontinued. And he ended up writing a whole essay on gun violence later on, upholding his decision to pull the book. Now, I am never one for censorship. I think that we should have the chance to read, to watch, to listen, to experience these pieces of art, these pieces of an artist's soul that they have given to us, that they have entrusted us with, that they have shared with us. And then it's up to us to make our decisions, to interpret them through our own lens. One thing that Stephen King is fantastic about is psychological portraits of his characters, insanely detailed. He talks a lot, even directly in some of his books, about Freudian psychology, our darker natures, the sides of our personalities that we don't like to admit having. And I think that's what's so powerful about Rage, is that our protagonist, Charlie Decker, admits that he has certain issues and tries to confront his classmates about it. But just to clarify, I'm going to give you a little bit more of the history, and then I'm just going to kind of scroll through my electronic copy. Don't ask me how I got it. I don't even remember. It was about a decade ago. It actually looks like it is a unproofread copy with a lot of typos of the Bachman books that somehow got leaked. I downloaded it when I found it online, and I didn't pick it up and read it for a number of years. So I really don't remember how I ended up having this in my possession. But Charlie Decker, see this, I'm rambling. Stephen King actually started writing this book when he was still in high school. He was a high school student. So our protagonist is a high school senior, and you definitely understand Charlie's perspective. And knowing that Stephen King started writing it when he was in high school, you see that, the feelings of an adolescent that's been put upon, that's ready to move forward into the world, but doesn't feel prepared to do so. We can all identify with that. We have all been there. We have also all felt like we were versus the institution, right? That it was the institution against us, the educational system against us, the job market against us, the it crowd against us, the popular kids against the dorks and the dweebs, or let's just face it, 95% of the people that are actually in high school are not the it crowd, whether they go so far as to be shunned as the geeks and the dweebs and the goths and the dorks and I was all of those things, or whether they're just, the average student. Most of us aren't in the it crowd. Most of us have our secrets, and we admit them to our close friends, but we admit them. Charlie tells everyone everything. And that's where his power comes from, and he challenges people to his classmates and the institution, the school principal, the chief of the fire department, the school guidance counselor, the psychologist that was treating him, are all faced with the truth of who they are, which they had learned through the institutions they were raised in to deny, right? To be the responsible adult without acknowledging that there's a part of us that doesn't live up to that we have outward expectations that are imposed upon us. This is the power of the book. There is a lot to unpack. The basic premise, and I don't want to quote or give away too much out of honor to Stephen King and his choice to pull the book, but I felt like I wanted to react to this book because there's been a lot of shootings, school shootings and otherwise, in the last, 13 years, 14 years since the book was pulled off the shelves. or put out of publication, right? You could still find it. They didn't actually pull the book from the shelves. They just discontinued its publishing. Any subsequent editions of the Bachman books that were published after 1997 did not have rage in it. So the premise, Charlie Decker is a troubled high school senior. It's never stated directly, but it's implied. If you have just, Psych 101 in college, your gen ed courses, that he has some sort of schizophrenia, some sort of disorder, depressive disorder. And it's hinted at that it might be genetic. His mother, at one point in this book, had a memory, used to be something, and had as in quite a woman, and had kind of devolved to this woman who just plays piano and ignores what's happening with her husband and child, lost in her own world, except to come out and baby her child, even when he doesn't need to be babied, when he needs to be punished for his own actions. Or at least taught, if not punished. So it's an incident that happens when he's 4 years old. I'm going off on a tangent about specifics, which is what I'm trying to not do. Charlie Decker did not have the best home life. His father was in the military and a military recruiter, and he was not a nice man. Charlie overhears things on camping trips with his buddies when he's supposed to be asleep in the tent. Terrible things about how to treat women, never once questioning that the man might be in the wrong. And this is what Charlie grows up realizing he's being taught, but realizing is wrong. But he feels the pressure from his father to be exactly like him, right? He has these feelings of anger, of resentment towards the institution. And this actually brings me to the other part of the history I kind of skipped over as I ramble and tangent here. Is that Stephen King finished writing the book after he was already in college and then had become a teacher, and he taught for, I think, 1 year. It was a very short-lived career before his writing took off and he didn't need to teach anymore. So you see the other side of the institution as well. You see the psychologist and the school principal who have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of kids to take care of, and how much time do they have to give and focus on just one student, no matter how much that student needs their attention and their care. So all of the institutions fail Charlie. And he has these physical symptoms. He has this nausea, this roiling stomach. He can't keep food down because of his angst, because of his anxiety. And when he's made fun of by a teacher for getting a problem incorrectly, that, by the way, was a physics problem that was being presented in a chemistry class. Charlie has a whole thing about this. There's a lot of humor in the book too, and that's what makes it so real and human, that in the most horrific of circumstances, we crack jokes. It's how we deal with it, and King does the exact same, and it's what makes the book palatable until the end. It's a fantastic technique, although there are some moments that as a writer, he's toward the beginning of his career, that he kind of calls out too many pop culture references to say, hey, look at me, I'm a smart writer. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. If I were looking at this strictly as a piece of literature, I would probably give it 3.5 stars. There you go. There's your rage rating. On a human element, how it affected me, it would probably get 7 out of 5, if not more. But yeah, so this teacher, this chemistry teacher that had a physics problem left over from the previous period, literally makes fun of Charlie when he doesn't get the answer right. He treats him like he's a bully, like he's another one of the students, not like he's a teacher who's supposed to be looking out for him, supposed to be helping him. And there's a violent incident, and this is all exposition that we learn throughout the book that happened before the book begins. The teacher ended up in the hospital. Charlie was suspended. He's brought back to school, but it's still up in the air whether or not he will be sent to, a school for troubled children. The bad kids school, I think, is what we used to call it when I was in a grade school. Ooh, he goes to that school. Or whether he would, after mandated visits with the school psychologist, be allowed to stay and graduate the school he'd been at. And he's gone from carrying a wrench in his pocket to carrying his father's pistol. That is normally, yes, kept hidden, but also had been shown to Charlie. was not kept locked. By the time we get here, his mother is just out of it. His father isn't paying attention. This kid is, 17 and has been on his own for at least a decade, really, except for when his father's beating him. So there's an incident with the principal. He's called to the principal's office, and it escalates, and he ends up going back into the classroom and shooting the algebra teacher and holding the kids hostage. Did I make a note here? No, I didn't. Here we go. Here's an example of Charlie's paranoia, right? And again, I'm not going to quote too much from this, but he's talking about being on the way to the principal's office and stopping in the bathroom. And we all know school bathrooms, that flush echoes in the hallway. Everyone knows. High school toilets are all the same. They sound like 747s taking off. I've always hated pushing that handle. It makes you sure that the sound is clearly audible in the adjacent classroom and that everybody is thinking, well, there goes another load. I've always thought a man should be alone with what my mother insisted I call lemonade and chocolate when I was a little kid. The bathroom should be a confessional sort of place, but they foil you. They always foil you. You can't even blow your nose and keep it a secret. Someone's always got to know. Someone's always got to peek. People like Mr. Denver and Mr. Grace even get paid for it. That's the school principal and psychologist. So this idea that no matter what he's doing, he's being watched and that he can never live up to expectations because he doesn't feel or behave like he's being told he's supposed to. And you know what? I'm not even going to go through this. I'm just going to talk. So he goes back to the classroom. He shoots the algebra teacher and then holds the rest of the class hostage. But the book is being written from the future looking back at it. Turns out that Charlie is in a psychiatric ward after this incident. And we get the sense that either he's talking to us or he's writing something. It's not made clear. We're just kind of in his head. Until he says, I have to go now, at the very end. He always says, I never made them stay. In fact, at one point, he lets a girl get up and go to the bathroom. And she chooses to come back. I've read some articles defining it as a Stockholm syndrome, but I didn't feel that when I read the book. There was one kid, Ted Jones, who was, the it man, the popular kid, big man on campus that played football and then just gave it up because, he tried it. He was a star. Coach wanted to kill him when he quit, but he just didn't want to do it, and he's cool. So it didn't even hurt his popularity. We find out through the course of the book that he had family problems, that he had to help his mother. So he quit football. But we also have in the class a guy named Pigpen because he's so dirty. And we learn as the book goes on that he's from a low-income family. That there's small-town embarrassment about his older sister that got pregnant before she graduated high school. We have the girl whose mother is known around town as a whore. So she's seen as a whore, no matter what she does. So why not play into it, even if she's not really a whore? We have the good, virtuous girl who actually sleeps around because she feels like her life is vapid and empty, and having sex with random strangers, a secret that no one knows, is the only way she can feel alive. Meanwhile, this all happened after Ted Jones, the big man on campus, disappointed her in the incident where she lost her virginity. What's the big deal, she thought, right? So my point in this is that we have all walks of life in this classroom. And it turns out the only person who really is mad at Charlie for what he's doing is the popular kid who won't admit that maybe he's not perfect, that maybe he doesn't live up to his dad, who's a huge business owner and pillar of the community, right? But we see and we understand Charlie's childhood. We understand how his father beat him when he was 4 for breaking storm windows. We also understand the 4-year-old's point of view, that it was just fun. It was a fun sound. It was something to do. You don't beat a 4-year-old child. They don't know any better. So in the world of modern psychology, of Freud and Jung, we understand how someone's history and childhood informs their future, their adulthood, their adolescence. It's so weird because by the end of this, you actually root for Charlie and for everyone to learn the lesson, which is just to be authentic. He just wants someone to be as honest with him as he is with the world. And as somebody who, we're going to get into some personal confessions here, as somebody who was hospitalized for a suicide attempt when I was an adolescent, I turned 14 in a hospital actually. As somebody who is diagnosed bipolar, the book really hits home. And while I, as an adult, understand that this is a work of fiction, that it's an insight into human nature and a call to action, a call to betterment, right? A call to honesty with yourself and with others, with the world. I denounce the violence that's in this book. I do. If this were to happen in real life, I would be horrified that a mob of teenagers could viciously attack a man for doing nothing than keeping his own secrets. Or another boy, I should say. He's proven himself to not be a man, Ted Jones. I have cat hair all over my... I can understand how if I had read this book when I was in high school, and I graduated high school in 1998, the year after this was discontinued, I didn't even know about this book until I was in my 30s. But if I had read it, I could see how this would cause me to take action. Say, hey, that's a good idea. Although I was one of those kids who, if I had found a gun, I would have turned it on myself, not on others. And I wonder how many unreported cases of suicide happen because of this book. It's still difficult for me to deal with as an adult. Understanding the world better, not being as self-centered as a teenager is. And that's nothing against teenagers. It's just the time of your life where you get to be self-centered. You're supposed to be learning about yourself as you blossom into an adult. And if this book can help you become an honest adult and have empathy for people who maybe have a mental illness, for people who maybe are less fortunate than you, who don't grow up with as much money, or with parents who are as wonderful or even decent. Not even as decent, just decent at all. I think the book is worth a read. But I think that the book is much more appropriate for an adult. Somebody who's lived their life, has come to understand some of these things, even if not fully themselves, understand concepts intuitively just through life experience that are addressed head on in this book. Issues of dating, of sex, of violence, of popularity, of sense of self, sense of worth. I do think you should read this book if you can find a copy of it. I think Rage is one of Stephen King's most resonant books. And yes, I know we just started the Stephen King readathon, but full disclosure, I started the Stephen King readathon maybe 5 years ago. And then about 3 years ago, I fell off of it. I had gotten through up to Roadwork, actually. So I'd read about 7 or 8 of these books, and it was the first time I'd read Rage. I have through my life read a number of Stephen King books as well. Through the 90s is when I was a preteen and a high schooler is when I first got interested in Stephen King. Firestarter was the first book I ever read. I took it away with me to summer camp when I was 12. And I've always wanted to read his entire body of work and go back and compare the films, which is what I'm doing now. And I actually read Rage twice before I decided to talk to you about it. I had to collect all my thoughts, which as you can see are still not very collected as I keep looking down and playing with my little clasp instead of talking to you. Look, here's the bottom line. I do think that Rage is a fantastic book. if you can tell that Stephen King wasn't as seasoned of a writer as he would soon, very soon become. You can see the themes of the individual versus institution with a capital I. You can see the themes of want of empathy. You can see themes of universality. That ultimately we are all the same. None of our lives are perfect. Some people have it better than others. Some people have it worse. I actually got into a discussion. I wait tables here in New York City. And there was someone that was talking about the area I wait tables and being down the road when Philip Seymour Hoffman committed suicide. And he was giving me his point of view, how you're living on the top of the world. Why would you ever want to do that? These stupid people, the high is real life. Why would you want to get high? And I had to very politely, because I was working, inform him that Philip Seymour Hoffman's death wasn't actually a case of accidental overdose. It was on purpose. And you never know what demons people are facing. I revealed to him that I'm a survivor of a suicide attempt. And I told him, in all honesty, when I was 13, which means obviously my mind was a little more warped just from pure adolescence than it is now as an adult. I honestly believed that I was a burden to the people I loved. I thought that my mother and father would have such an easier life if I wasn't around. I honestly believed that the handful of friends that I considered friends that I really loved and adored and cherished, I really believed that they were kind people. They weren't part of the it crowd. In fact, we were the out crowd to an extent. But within us, our circle, we were so popular to each other, right? Among the dorks, we were the cool kids. And I understood all of that then. But I also understood I had non-judgmental, very kind friends. And while I know now, because I still talk to these people, a lot of them, they were indeed my friend. But at the time, I honestly thought that they were just nice. That they felt sorry for me because I didn't have any other friends, and that's why they spoke to me. I thought they wouldn't have to continue lying and pretending if I wasn't around. And this level of honesty, the acknowledgement that we all have our demons, is all Charlie wants in Rage. He just wants to be treated like a real person. So this is me not made up and not hair fixed. And, you know, if we're going to be honest here, I was editing this video when I realized that my camera shut off during the filming. So it was just another few minutes of me still rambling, but basically just talking about my own experiences and how honesty and truly believing what people tell you is a skill that we all have to learn. And we shouldn't be driven to violent actions to be treated with respect or honesty. On the other side of it, as adults, especially those with children, I do not have children, I have nephews that I love dearly, and I fear for them and their future in this world, and the violence that we see in the world, and this uptick that has been happening with gun violence around, violence in general, but gun violence around the world, around America. We need stricter gun control. We need laws that enforce background checks, get rid of the loopholes, so people like Charlie and Charlie's dad aren't able to have guns in their home. People like me shouldn't be able to have access to a gun, in all honesty, given my mental history. But I could probably go out and get a gun and walk home with it in the same day. following all legal channels. So lobby your Congress people. Get out on the streets and protest. We need accountability. And we need better social services, and we need better institutions. We need people who will take these things seriously and look after our children and love on kitty cats. Because there is nothing more important than kitty cats. And hamsters. And there's another kitty cat all the way over there. So this is why I call it David's Den. And you guys, I'm sorry for the unpolished look. But I figure if we're being honest, this is what I look like most of the time. Do you like my hopefully last home self-done COVID haircut? It's really a flock of seagulls when there's no product in it, huh? So yeah, guys, I'll see you next time. I'm already working on the halfway through review for The Shining. So this should get pretty exciting. And I do want to know your opinion. Should I try to find the TV movie miniseries starring Steven Weber and I think it's Rebecca De Mornay that Stephen King himself thinks is a better adaptation of his novel? Or should I review the very often and probably overly reviewed Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining, one of the greatest films of all time, but that Stephen King hates? Let me know down below. See you guys then.